The laugh track cuts like a wire. A buzzer blares, too loud, too bright, and then silence. Steve Harvey is halfway down the stage stairs, jacket unbuttoned, eyes locked on the third row. A small boy in a blue knit beanie squeezes a scuffed toy car until his knuckles pale. His mother stares at the floor as if the floor knows answers. Beside them, a grandmother clutches a letter softened by years of folding and refolding. The families at the podiums step back. The scoreboard keeps glowing, oblivious. A camera operator reaches to reframe, freezes mid-gesture because Steve has stopped being host and has become gravity. 30 seconds. Staccato. A heartbeat laid over stadium lights. A breath that sounds like a prayer accidentally spoken into a live mic. We were here for a game. We were here for noise. But the moment asked for quiet. Steve stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. It didn't start with a sad story. It started with laughter, light banter, and families who came to play. There was joy, jokes, and the familiar rhythm of Family Feud. The crowd cheered with each good answer, like a ritual of comfort. But somewhere in the third row, there was a boy named Malik who wasn't there for a prize. He was there for a break from the hospital lights. His mother, Rosa, had written weeks ago, "He treats the show like church. It's the only hour he doesn't ask how long until the next needle." And beside her sat Loretta, the grandmother, holding a folded letter she kept adding to. One line every Sunday to her late husband, about life continuing in small, quiet ways. The game went on. Name something you can't start your day without, Steve asked. The answers came: coffee, phone, toothbrush, prayer. He teased, danced, and made everyone laugh. The boy in the beanie smiled. Rosa exhaled. Loretta smoothed the letter, ready to add tonight's line. I saw Steve Harvey in person. Round after round, joy covered pain like sunlight over frost. Then came the question. Name something a grandmother keeps in her purse. The crowd shouted answers. Tissues, mints, photos, wisdom. Steve laughed, his eyes searching the audience for a grandmother to prove the point. That's when he saw Loretta, the letter in her hands, the boy beside her, the stillness between breaths. He stopped mid-sentence. The room felt it first, then the crew, then the world. Steve stepped down from the stage. The producers tensed. This wasn't in the script. But Steve had learned something about timing. Sometimes the right moment doesn't need permission. He knelt beside the boy. Hey man, he said softly. You brought something with you? The boy held up the toy car. It's for speed, he whispered when things are slow. Steve smiled. Brother, you just taught the whole room a sermon. He turned to the grandmother. What's in a letter, ma'am? She shook her head. Not for TV. That's all right, he said. Some things are for our own kitchen tables. He took off his light-colored jacket and placed it gently over the boy's shoulders. Now you've got some of my speed, too. The audience didn't cheer. They exhaled because some silences deserve to live. Behind the scenes, producers panicked about airtime, ad slots, and lost minutes. But Steve knew better. He had seen enough shows to understand that not all miracles wait for commercial breaks. He looked into the camera. Sometimes the right answer isn't on the board, he said. Sometimes the right answer is the person in front of you. He reached into his pocket and handed Rosa a card. This is not TV. This is Tuesday. We're not going to let Tuesday be the day your boy remembers pain. The audience began to cry quietly. The families on stage stepped closer. The crew froze, trying not to blink away their own tears. A few minutes later, Steve looked again into camera 3 and said with calm conviction, subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The crowd didn't understand yet, but they would, because Steve had already decided. The next segment would not be a game. It'd be a moment. He called Loretta closer. Would you mind letting me hold your letter? She nodded and handed it to him. He placed it gently on the podium. This, he said, is our buzzer for this round. Every right answer rings through somebody we miss. He asked for answers again, about love, about memory, about the people we carry. The audience began to understand that Family Feud had just become Family Truth. Later, a soft cough drew attention back to the boy. Steve knelt again. Can I tell you a secret? He asked. Sometimes I'm scared of the next thing, too. I wear suits like armor. I make jokes like bridges. But when the laughter stops, I borrow courage from others. Can I borrow a little of yours? The boy nodded. Only if you give it back. Steve smiled. Deal. Moments later, he looked into the camera again. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. He asked the band to play a single, gentle note. He called both families down from the stage. He looked at the crowd and said, "Let's agree that this letter carries a love that doesn't quit, that this boy carries courage that doesn't flinch, that this mother carries strength that doesn't ask for applause, and that each of us leaves here ready to add a line to our own letter." He placed his business card beside the letter, then took it back and handed it to Rosa. "Paper chain," he said. "Your line links to mine." The jacket slipped from the boy's shoulders onto his lap. Steve picked it up and turned the inner pocket outward. "See this lining?" he said. "Strong because of many threads, not one." He placed the toy car inside and smiled. "Final round. Name something you keep that keeps you." The grandmother whispered, "A letter." The man from the team said, "A name." The mother said, "A promise." The boy said, "A pocket." "It keeps the things that keep me." Steve blinked hard. "Survey says we take care of each other." When the show ended, no one rushed out. The audience stood silently, as if afraid that moving too soon would break the spell. Weeks later, the episode aired. Steve left the seams unedited, every pause, every tear. Viewers didn't just watch, they wrote letters. Teachers used it in class. Nurses played it during night shifts. A man who'd lost his job said, "I said my name out loud in my kitchen. It helped." Rosa called the number on the card. The boy got help and hope. Months later, a package arrived in Steve's office. Inside, the jacket cleaned and pressed. A small blue stitch along the lining, the color of a beanie. The toy car inside. A note for the next kid. It's for speed when things are slow. Steve traced the blue thread with his thumb, held the jacket to the window, and whispered, "Keep the lining strong." And from that day forward, every taping had a pause, small moments where the host stopped being a performer and became a man listening for the heartbeat beneath the laughter. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Weeks turned into months, but the echo of that day inside the Family Feud studio never faded. Something had shifted, not only in the hearts of those who were there, but in the way Steve Harvey looked at his work, his purpose, and his platform. Would have been just another episode turned into a chapter of his life, one that rewrote the way he defined success. It wasn't about ratings anymore. It was about reach, not how many watched, but how deeply they felt. One morning, long before the studio lights warmed the stage, Steve arrived early. The building was quiet, just the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint buzz of neon exit signs. He sat in the contestant area, staring at the empty podiums. The memory of Malik, the boy with the blue beanie, lingered in the silence like incense after prayer. The jacket, now neatly hanging backstage, seemed to breathe on its own. Its blue-stitched lining caught the faintest glimmer of light whenever someone walked by. Steve leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't ever want to get used to the noise," he muttered, "because the noise can hide the miracles." He opened a notebook he'd started calling interruptions. On the first page, written in bold letters, were the words, "Break the pattern when the pattern breaks the people." It had become his private mantra. During the next few shows, the staff noticed subtle changes. The laughter still roared, the banter still hit, but between the rounds, Steve began a pause. He looked at faces instead of just names. He asked contestants where they came from, not for the joke, but for the meaning. "What keeps you up?" he asked one father of 5. "What gets you out of bed?" Sometimes, he would see the lights in someone's eyes flicker when the questions hit too close. And when that happened, he didn't rush to save it with humor. He let it breathe. One night, after a taping, a young intern approached him shyly. "Mr. Harvey," she said, "that thing you did with the boy, it changed my idea of television." Steve chuckled. "It changed my idea of life." "But weren't you afraid?" she asked. "You stopped the show. You went off script." He nodded slowly. "I was. But you see, if you only do what the script allows, you'll never find what the soul requires." That became the seed of a project he'd start later, something he called Moments That Matter. It wasn't a show, not in the usual sense. It was a small foundation that sent letters, toys, jackets, or sometimes just handwritten notes to people who wrote in after seeing that episode. Thousands of messages came from around the world, stories of families finding hope in the smallest acts. One came from a retired teacher in North Carolina. "I lost my husband last year. I've been writing him letters too. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not the only one still talking to the ones who left." Another came from a 13-year-old girl. "I was scared of going back to school after chemo. But then I watched how you talk to that boy, and I thought, maybe people can be kind when cameras are on and when they're off." Steve read every one. He kept them in a box marked human episodes. Because, he said once in an interview, that's what life is, a bunch of human episodes trying to connect. Months later, during a live taping, Steve received a surprise. As the band rehearsed, a stagehand handed him an envelope. Inside was a photo. Malik standing beside a hospital window, the toy car in his hand. He looked stronger, smiling, hair beginning to grow back. Below the picture was a note. "Still fast, even on slow days." Steve's hand trembled slightly. He smiled, looked up, and whispered, "Still fast." Then, when the cameras rolled, he carried that same energy into every laugh, every moment of kindness, every break between rounds. During one of those episodes, something remarkable happened again. A contestant froze mid-answer, tears welling up. She couldn't find her voice. The room went quiet, the same kind of sacred silence that once filled it months ago. Without hesitation, Steve stepped forward, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said, "Take your time. There's no buzzer for healing." The audience applauded softly, no laughter this time, just warmth. He didn't need to explain what that meant. Everyone in the room understood. It was no longer just Family Feud. It was Family Found. After the show, he sat in his dressing room, staring at the mirror framed with lights. In the reflection, behind him on a hook, hung the same cream-colored jacket. The blue-stitched pocket glowed faintly under the vanity lights. He touched it gently, remembering the boy's voice. "Only if you give it back." He whispered, "I'm still giving it back, little man." In interviews, people often asked him, "What's your proudest moment on TV?" They expected stories about ratings, success, or awards. But Steve always smiled and said, "It's the moment the cameras didn't know whether to keep rolling. The one where the show stopped being a show." In his next book, he dedicated a whole chapter to that day. He titled it The Blue Stitch. He wrote, "Every time life unravels, there's a chance to stitch something stronger. The jacket taught me that. The boy reminded me. And the letter proved that love doesn't retire. It just changes handwriting." Years later, Malik's family visited the studio again. This time, the boy walked on his own. Taller, confident, eyes bright. He wore a simple gray blazer. Steve saw him and froze mid-step again. The audience cheered, sensing the weight of the reunion. Malik reached into his pocket and pulled out the same toy car, slightly worn but still intact. "Still fast?" Steve asked. "Always," Malik said. Steve laughed, voice trembling. You once told me to give it back." "I know," the boy said, "but I think you already did." They hugged, and the audience stood as if instinct had replaced direction. The lights shimmered across faces wet with tears and smiles. The scoreboard behind them flickered faintly, but stayed frozen. No need to count points for what had already been won. As the credits rolled, Steve looked into the camera one last time, eyes glistening. "Don't wait for a camera to do what your heart already knows how to do," he said. "Help whole hug. That's the game we all win." The music swelled softly. Somewhere in the distance, Loretta's letter rested in her handbag, folded one last time, with one final line written before she passed. "We saw Grace on a Tuesday." And tucked inside a jacket with blue stitching, a small note remained. Steve's handwriting, almost faded. "Keep the lining strong, because the show goes on." And sometimes the most unforgettable moments happen when it doesn't.